What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to Studs and Duds, the most comprehensive NFL player review series on the internet. Today, we're going to be talking about all of the rising and falling players from every AFC team from weeks 1 through 5. For those that maybe didn't tune in to the NFC episode last week or skipped over it because I accidentally blacked out the screen for it, I do just want to talk a little bit about what this series is about if you're new. But many of you may know this channel actually started as a Madden channel where I would edit EA's ratings because I didn't think they were any good. And then I would come here on YouTube and talk about why I made the changes I did. Well, I no longer make Madden content on this channel. I do have a second channel, TFG Plays, if you want to check that out. We're going to be starting up a Raiders Tear It Down rebuild soon, so definitely go check that out. But while I don't make Madden content on this channel anymore, I do still make that roster. And that all led to this series here, Studs and Duds, that provides a really nice platform to just review the whole league, talk about who's playing well, who's not playing well. So in this video, you're going to be seeing those Madden ratings changes, but have no fear. Those all stem from film research and analysis, and those ratings changes do reflect how I think these guys are playing in real life. So it really just works. I hope you guys enjoy. If you do, please do hit that like button down below. A ton goes into this every week. And just, you know, it helps show your support, helps the video do better and push this out to other NFL fans like you. But without further ado, let's get started. The Cincinnati Bengals, and their star of the month was a little bit more challenging considering it's been a difficult month for them. But I am going to go with their rookie second-round cornerback, DJ Turner, who's just really looked the part. He was obviously drafted off of his speed. But I mean, he's been in position in coverage. He's been physical against the run, which was kind of a knock on him as he's a little bit more slender. I would say he's held up in terms of his play strength and ability to manage NFL-sized wide receivers, if you will. So, yeah, I mean, looks like a good pick. We'll continue to see how he grows, but his impact on this defense has come a little bit sooner, I think, than they maybe expected even. But let's talk about this offense a little bit before circling back to some of these other players on the defense. And there's definitely some players struggling on this offense. And I consider Joe Burrow as well, but now that we've seen that ankle heal and last week he played much better, I think it's fair to just leave him alone for now. Not that Joe Burrow's played all that bad, to be completely honest. He's just been limited. But some of these other guys around him have just not been able to step up, and I think that's led to a lot of their struggles. And Joe Mixon just continues to look, to me, a little bit lethargic, especially compared to what he used to be. I just don't see the same juice, and when he does get a lane, whether it's to the sideline or into the second level, he's just really unable to pull away from defenders. So I think the beating he's taken, the injuries that he's suffered throughout his career have probably slowed him down a little bit, and he's still a decent running back, but certainly not what he used to be. Tyler Boyd as well. I mean, his efficiency is just falling off a cliff. It reminds me actually a lot of kind of what we said about Adam Thielen over the last couple of years with the Vikings, where he's still getting targets. He's still kind of operating within the offense and catching the ball when they throw it his way. But he just really is, his efficiency is fallen off a cliff. His yards per reception is almost cut in half of what it was last year. Just doesn't look very dynamic at this point in time, getting up there in age as well. So yeah, I just had to come down a little bit. Irv Smith has really struggled. This one's more self-explanatory. He's almost kind of getting phased out of the offense already, and he struggled last year for the Vikings when he was healthy, but he's had just really poor hands here in Cincinnati, and he's not much of a blocker, so this signing does not look like it's going to work out in the same way that Hayden Hurst did last year. And then some of these guys on the offensive line, especially on the left side, are really struggling right now. Orlando Brown has had one of his worst starts in his career. He's been getting beat a few too many times in pass pro. He's got to come down. He's also not really moving people in the run game in this system the way you would expect him to at his size. So, yeah, he's obviously a fascinating conversation because he wanted to be paid so much. I still think he's being paid at a decent, fair amount to what he is now. But clearly was never worth that massive contract. And then the left guard, Cordell Volson. We continue to talk about this guy because the Bengals really like him for some reason, even though for the first 4 weeks of the season, just a complete turnstile at left guard, like literally a swivel wheel where 4 straight weeks, teams were just burning right through him. Was a little bit better against the Cardinals week 5. Granted, it's the Cardinals. If you want to give Volson some credit, it's that he has contributed as a run blocker, that kind of chip on his shoulder mentality that he has as an offensive lineman. But yeah, he's just not reliable in pass pro, never has been, and has continued to struggle. I really wish for the Bengals' sake they would give something else a go at left guard. But let's talk a little bit more about this defense. So you have Trey Hendrickson going up. I mean, he is a rock-solid top 10 edge rusher and probably doesn't get brought up in that way enough, and he's just getting better and better and better seemingly every week for the Bengals. I mean, year 1 was impressive. Year 2 last year was even more impressive, and then this year he is off to a career year. He has been taking over games, that Rams game, the Cardinals game. He's just an all-around impressive number 1 edge rusher at this point in his career, and just continues to climb. And then Zach Carter, their mid-round pick that I was extremely critical of when they took him. Nothing crazy here, but he's been a little bit more effective when they have used him. He's actually matched his 2022 season total on pressures already. He's got 4 pressures this year. He had 4 pressures all of last season. So as a situational rusher, as that 3-tech on the inside, he's doing a little bit more, and he's held up a little bit better situationally against the run as well. So a little bit of love for Zach Carter, and then my dude Daxton Hill. I thought about him as star of the month as well, but the thing is, he's lived up to my expectations of him. He looks really comfortable back there. I think he's already one of the more rangy free safeties in the NFL, and we've seen that on some really impressive pass breakups and interceptions, of course, but even coming downfield and tackling, he's not quite Jesse Bates yet, but that has not been the problem for this team, is them missing Jesse Bates. It's probably more of them missing Von Bell, honestly, as I considered dropping Nick Scott, who's played quite poorly, but it's not like he's rated all that high anyway. And then just a little note on Mike Hilton. He has really struggled in run defense, which is just so uncharacteristic of him. He, to me, heading into the year, I perceived him as the best run defending slot corner in the NFL. And they ask a lot of him because they almost never get into, base sort of 7-man fronts. He plays a lot of kind of weak side linebacker for them, and they ask a lot of him, and he's handled that in years past. But this year, he's been out of position. He's been missing tackles, and if he can't get back to what he's done in the past, he's going to have to come down a little bit. But then we have the Buffalo Bills. Been a little bit of an up and down month for them. But their star of the month for me is actually going to be Spencer Brown. Probably not the first guy that comes to my mind, but in terms of significance of this guy playing well, I think he's got to be your star of the month. I had him circled as probably this team's largest question mark heading into the year. He's been really rough in pass protection in the first 2 years of his career. He was a bit of a project offensive lineman coming out 2 years ago out of Northern Iowa as a 3rd-round pick. And the project was in full force. He's been benched at times. He's had really brutal games at times. But to start his 3rd season here, this is what you love to see from a toolsy player like this. He's been much better in pass protection and looks like he's starting to get some of that confidence to transfer some of that incredible athleticism that he has into a good product on the field. So this is very good news for the Buffalo Bills. But they have some other guys playing well offensively as well. James Cook was certainly an offensive star of the month candidate. He just really looks the part as an NFL running back. Was obviously just kind of an interesting prospect coming out where he wasn't utilized very much at Georgia in the run game. And yeah, I mean, he goes in the 2nd round for his athleticism. We didn't really necessarily know how good of a runner of the football he was going to be. We figured he'd be very impactful in the receiving game. But in this offense that does a good job to open things up by spreading things out and allowing a guy with this speed to just get a lane and hit it hard, he's really thriving here 4.8 yards per attempt. He's got 292 yards on the season. He's forced 9 missed tackles forced. He has 8 runs of over 10 yards. He's just looking the part. So good on them for identifying that and put him in a position to succeed. And then Gabe Davis as well. I mean, I had a good vibe on him coming into the year. I ended up with him in a lot of fantasy leagues. He did struggle last year, but it kind of came out late that he was dealing with a lingering injury all season. He kind of heads into the year keeping this number 2 job and gets healthy heading into a contract year here. And he looks like the Gabe Davis that Bills fans wanted to see last year. He's been really consistently available when they don't go to Stephon Diggs, and they've really needed him as well because you see Dawson Knox going down here. Dalton Kincaid hasn't been the impact on this offense that they had probably hoped, but Gabe Davis being reliable and winning tough catches and making huge plays down the field. He's been a great red zone option for them as well. It's been monumental to have him playing like this, and he's heading towards a pretty significant payday, whether it's here or somewhere else. But yeah, Dawson Knox has had drop issues. He's not coming down with tough catches. He does not seem to be responding to the adversity of this team, basically trying to replace him in a lot of ways by taking Dalton Kincaid. He's still playing quite a lot because he's more of that inline player for them. But yeah, in the receiving game, he's certainly not living up to it. Now, this Connor McGovern signing definitely looks like a good one by the Bills. He was a fascinating player that had kind of stepped in for Dallas as a quasi backup, but then a full-time starter last year. Had a breakout year last year, and we weren't necessarily sure if it was a blip or if he really was a lockdown pass protector. And so far through 5 weeks, he's been one of the best pass protecting guards in the NFL. So between him and Spencer Brown, this Bills team has done an excellent job solidifying this offensive line. I would say Osiris Torrance as well. Not going to go up because I liked him quite a lot as a prospect. I think he's fairly rated, but he's playing well too. So the Bills' pass protection that was a big question mark coming into the year, it has been really solid for them, even if they've had some other issues in other spots. But let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball, and this defensive line as well was a question mark for the Bills, and they have really stepped up, which is huge considering they've had all of these injuries back here. But a couple of interior pieces. Ed Oliver, after getting that massive contract extension, is on a mission, man. He looks like he's going to live up to that contract right now, which was kind of in question. He's just been a very inconsistent player in his time in Buffalo here, but man, you look at what he did in that Jags game and really all year, he's been playing well. And then Daquan Jones, holy hell, I am not kidding. I have no idea where this came from. I mean, he's been a good player throughout his career. He's been an adequate rusher and a pretty good run defender. But, you know, you're talking about a defensive tackle on the wrong side of 30 who ran a 5.35 coming out, who's never been a great pass rusher. He's had some pass rush reps this year showing quickness and pass rush moves that I did not think were in his tool belt. So it's just a couple of games of that. But if that's who Daquan Jones is when he's already a good run defender, that's a huge, surprise impact for this defensive line. He's got to get healthy, though. Missed a lot of time in that Jags game. Then we got Leonard Floyd, the veteran, stepping in, kind of waiting on Von Miller to come back. He's done a good job here. He's been getting after the quarterback. I think he's got 5 sacks on the season. Some of it is cleanup work, but that's who Leonard Floyd is. He's just a good, aware, active player on the edge going up here. And then A.J. Epinesa, it's too bad it didn't lead to a victory, but he did take over the Jags offensive line. He had a massive game in London. And really, for that performance alone, he's got to come up. So definitely a lot of guys. That's not all of it, too. We got Kingsley Jonathan here, a rotational edge that's gotten in for, a few snaps here or there because they've needed some guys to step up with the injuries they do have on the edge. And he's got 5 pressures, a sack. He's looked good when he's played. So really a no-name player stepping up, providing some good snaps for them. And then Greg Rousseau, too. He's up to 3 sacks on the season already. He's got to get healthy too, though. He missed that Jags game, didn't even make the trip. But he as well, I think, just shows that he's continuing to understand the game better and playing well. So he's going up. really important for this Bills team that all these guys on the D-line are stepping up, because coming into the year, these guys were definitely question marks. A lot of them were, at least. But then you get to the second level. Obviously, injuries galore with Matt Milano, looking like he's going to miss the rest of the year. But, man, it's a relief that their guy, Terrell Bernard, is playing so well. He was a guy that they identified, kind of took him a lot earlier than a lot of people thought he would go in the draft. But I think it was just good scouting on their end to see that this was a guy with the character and football intelligence to make it in the NFL. Even if he wasn't the biggest guy or the best tester necessarily, he does see the game really well. He's flying to the ball. He's been a secure tackler. He's been okay in coverage. He's going to have his hands full, potentially, wearing the green dot and being the leader of the middle of this defense with Milano out. It's going to be a big test for him, but he's shown that he can at least be a decent player there, which is just so huge, obviously. Like, if he was struggling, Milano goes down, you just let Edmonds go. That could get ugly there at linebacker. I think he's going to hold it down okay. Jordan Poyer is not having a good year. We knew at some point these safeties, they're both 32, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. They can't play at that high level forever. And at least in Jordan Poyer's case right now, he just has not been around the ball. He's just, blowing his lanes in run defense, not making plays in coverage. He's giving up some yardage. Just doesn't quite look like that impact safety at this point in his season, at least. We'll see if he can turn it around. But the kicker, Tyler Bass, is also going to go up. He has been automatic. What a find Bass has been for the Bills, really from the get-go. Next up, we have the Denver Broncos, and star of the month was definitely challenging for this team, but how about the undrafted rookie out of Youngstown State, the running back Jaleel McLaughlin? Devon Achane or Achan and Jahmyr Gibbs definitely get their credit, but man, this little 5'7" scat back out of Youngstown State can fly. He's got some junk in the trunk and some contact balance too. I really think they found something here, at least as a quasi Tariq Cohen, Nyheim Hines type of player. I don't know, maybe I'm going too far, but he has really passed the eye test, especially within this Sean Payton offense that loves to get these running backs involved in the receiving game. So definitely a nice find there, but we've got some negatives to talk about with this offense for sure, starting with the quarterback, Russell Wilson. And, the first 3 weeks, I thought he was playing okay, but the last couple weeks have been much more difficult to watch. It doesn't feel like a fit with Sean Payton. He's holding onto the ball way too long. He's not trusting it. He's not trusting his receivers for whatever reason. He's taking way too many sacks these last couple of weeks, making mistakes. It's just not working here. It feels like they're eventually going to have to find a different solution here at this point. But he definitely continues to fall after that rough year last year. Even if he is playing a little bit better than he was last year, he's still coming down from that once great quarterback that he was perceived as. But then wide receiver Jerry Jeudy not benefiting from Russell Wilson's lack of trust in the offense, but his lack of production definitely concerning. You got Steve Smith calling him out, before the Thursday Night Football game, and he comes out with a pretty lousy night himself. I still like Jerry Jeudy. Would love to see him go to Carolina or Kansas City or somewhere that he could get a fresh start, because it feels like he just needs it. But he's always kind of been missing a little something. Call it it factor, call it football awareness, call it physicality. I don't know. He's got a little bit of Corey Davis syndrome about him, I think. But then the wide receiver Marvin Mims has stepped up when they've called his number, and they've called it very few times. But when they have, it's like, hey, Marvin, just run deep and do what you did at Oklahoma. Just run go balls. Russ will find you. Come down with it. And he has converted more often than not on those, if not every single time. He's definitely passed the eye test in that regard. Apparently, he's still learning the offense and diversifying his route tree, which was expected from him coming out of Oklahoma, because that is literally all he did. But he does that damn thing. He does that one thing damn well, and it's good to see that translate at the NFL level. Then the last guy on offense here is going to be Adam Troutman coming down. He's played a lot as Greg Dulcich has struggled to stay on the field. Troutman followed Peyton over from New Orleans, and he is not playing well. He's actually been a under-the-radar issue for this offense. 0 for 3 on contested catch looks. He has yet to do really anything after the catch at all, and he's blocking worse than he ever has here, so he's got to come down. But then on the defensive side of the ball, Mike Purcell at 32 and a half years old seems to be slowing down in terms of his run defense ability. Just 2 defensive stops for him on the season. That's well below what he's used to getting on the inside there, grading out quite poorly as a run defender right now. But some of these young edge guys, they're not like special or amazing at this point in time, but they are fun. You know, you got Jonathan Cooper coming in here. He's got 17 pressures, 4 sacks on the season. He's had some good performances. You know, if he keeps this up, maybe we can reshape what we thought about him as a prospect, where he was kind of viewed as a good number 3 down the road that can do a little bit of everything. But, you know, if he's winning one-on-one matchups and showing some good pass rush moves to get by good tackles, maybe he continues to climb here. He's not a bad athlete. He just is kind of average in a lot of different traits, but he's definitely producing well thus far and has stepped up at an edge group where obviously the veterans Randy Gregory and Frank Clark have not been available for them. Likewise with Nick Bonito. Now, Bonito I think is much more fascinating. I keep saying this with him, but I think it's relevant. My pro comp for him coming out was literally lightning in a bottle. He's one of the most explosive, bendiest edge rushers I've ever seen. And he's mostly winning with that explosiveness and bend. But now he's he's producing. He's got 5 sacks on the season, granted on just 18 total pressures, which is a solid number, don't get me wrong, but that's a high conversion rate in terms of pressures to sacks. I don't know if he's going to be able to keep that up and finish with a 15-sack season necessarily, but now that he's getting substantial playing time with all these veterans leaving, I'm excited to see him continue to develop his skill set, and what I would love to see from him is some bull rush wins, because I think he has the physical tools to convert speed to power, and if he can do that, he can definitely kind of reach a next level. We can really start to talk about him being a high upside kind of draft and develop freak in the second round. But definitely one of the more fun Denver Broncos defensive players to watch right now, with a unit that isn't very fun to watch. And Drew Sanders, the third round linebacker, has been a part of that. Drew Sanders coming out of Arkansas was definitely a raw prospect, had played just 1 season as an off-ball linebacker in his career, having been an edge at Alabama. And the biggest knock on Sanders was tackling, where he missed, I think, about 20% of his tackles at Arkansas. And right now, he had to get in there because I think it was Singleton that got hurt. But Drew Sanders has missed 36% of his tackle attempts and has been benched. Like, you can't have that. He's got to improve his technique and probably beef up a little bit. He's a little bit lanky and I think struggles to wrap up. So if he can't tackle, he can't play linebacker right now. So I'm not giving up on Drew Sanders, but he definitely needs to come down and has a ways to go. And then another one of my guys, Damari Mathis, the corner, has had a really rough season. It's probably time this team starts to think about maybe benching Mathis. His consistency is just really, really piss poor. He makes plays, and that's what I liked about him at Pittsburgh. And, you know, he's physical and instinctive, but he's getting targeted left and right, as you would expect with Pat Surtain on the other side. But he's given up a completion percentage of 75% when targeted. He's third in all of the NFL in yards allowed. He's given up 4 touchdowns, just 1 pass breakup on those 36 targets. And to boot, he's missing tackles at a really high rate. He's already missed 11 tackles on the season, which also leads the NFL by 4 among cornerbacks in the league. So he's really struggling. He's got the physical tools, but right now he just is lacking in a lot of different ways and probably should take a seat where it's just going to continue to be bad for this defense. And they do have one corner that's played okay, which is Jaquan McMillan, who was an undrafted free agent for them last year, who played a little bit for them. but he's taken over as this team's slot corner. Broncos fans, let me know. I don't know if Isang Bassey got benched or hurt, but regardless, McMillan has stepped in for Bassey since week 4 and has definitely outplayed Isang Bassey. So I'm curious to see if that holds up. But yeah, McMillan has done a good job kind of cleaning up this defense a little bit that has been better these last couple of weeks. His tackling efficiency has been an asset for them. Kind of in that short to intermediate part of the field. Bassey had missed 7 tackles in 3 games, which is really a problem for them. So I think he's been a part of some of those improvements these last couple of weeks. Coverage, you haven't really felt him getting destroyed necessarily, but probably nothing too special there. 5'9" corner who ran a 4.58 undrafted free agent out of East Carolina. Maybe turns into the next Chris Harris here, but I'm not expecting that. But had to create him, wasn't in the game. But yeah, nice entry to the season for Jaquan McMillan. Okay, next we have the Cleveland Browns. Their star of the month is going to come from the defensive side of the ball. A player that was a bit of a question mark, but definitely a potential breakout player heading into the year, and that is safety Grant Delpit, a player that dealt with injuries earlier in his career and was viewed as a little bit raw potentially coming out of LSU, but a lengthy, uber athletic, high upside safety that when you watch the film on the Browns from late last season, you're not terribly surprised to see him settle in and play this well, but he has been all over the field for the Browns, whether it's in coverage where he's been making plays down the field, but also just in run defense where he has cleaned up his tackling. He has been kind of that Jamal Adams type of player, really. I mean, that was sort of the high-end comp on him coming out of LSU, and I know it's high praise, but at the same time, Jamal Adams has kind of fallen off himself, but that's really the type of athlete and player that we're talking about here with Grant Delpit, and at least through 4 weeks right now, that's the type of safety he's been back there for the Browns. And to have a guy like that when everything else is clicking in, it's as we've seen, kind of a cheat code for the Browns D. But let's talk about the offense. Obviously, with Nick Chubb going down, you would expect some of these running backs to step up. Jerome Ford has had a big play, really, that huge run he had against the Steelers. It was like, whoa, I didn't know Jerome Ford had that next gear to outrun the defense like that. He's also been pretty stable in the receiving game, but in terms of his down-to-down vision and efficiency as a runner, it's not quite what you want to see, but he looks like he's at least capable. I will say Pierre Strong has been really effective when he's ran. I have Pierre Strong very highly rated. He was my number 3 back or maybe number 4 back in that class, and I like the trade that they made to get him. We will see how that split works out here coming off the bye week. But on the offensive line, Jedrick Wills really just continues to fall. I mean, he fell last year. He's just a average whatever offensive lineman. Honestly, it's kind of like the AFC counterpart, first round pick Alabama offensive tackle for the Bengals in Jonah Williams, where like he's not horrible necessarily, but he certainly has not lived up to that first round pedigree. And that's really what we're seeing with Jedrick Wills, just an overall lack of consistency and dominance. And then DeJuan Jones, at least one of these tackles is stepping up. I mean, I loved DeJuan coming out. I was just flabbergasted when he went in the 4th round. I had him as a first-round prospect, and for whether I was right or wrong, I mean, I had him over Darnell Wright, who I also liked. But that just goes to show you really how much I liked DeJuan Jones. And so to see him fall in the 4th round sounds like it was because of potentially like passion for the game or some bullshit like that. But this dude, his length and grip strength and just physical tools for the offensive line position, I just didn't get the fall, man. He reminded me so much of a Mekhi Becton coming out. And Jones has been really good in pass protection. He's had a couple ugly reps here or there because he's still putting things together in terms of his foot speed and hand placement. But all in all, he's been a very sound pass protecting right tackle. Held up okay against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, he just never should have gone that far. And what a find he was in a year where they lose their right tackle for the season. It was just an all-around blessing for the Browns. But as far as this defense is concerned, They've got some other guys stepping up. Myles Garrett continues his climb towards the 99 club, if you will. We very well might see that next Studs and Duds. With the way that Jim Schwartz has unleashed him, I think he's seeing more one-on-one opportunities, partially because of scheme, but also, with having some other pieces around him. But they're lining him up over the center where it's more difficult to kind of pinpoint how to double him, and they're just getting more creative. It's increased his production. And he's taken over football games. I mean, he really, to me, is the defensive player of the year right now, and arguably the best player in the NFL, not named Patrick Mahomes. So he's been incredible. But even a guy like Alex Wright, who, give him credit, he himself seems to be working at his game. But Wright, they, to me, took way too early. I didn't see it as an edge player. But Jim Schwartz has looked at this guy and said, hey, I think you might be able to match up on a guard and get lost and win a one-on-one when I'm moving all these other elite players around. And that's what they've done. They've put him in very situational packages. And he's, he had a nice sack. He's been getting some pressure. So they're finding a nice way to use even a guy like him. It's just Jim Schwartz is doing such a good job with this defense. And how about Maurice Hurst, man? A lot of you are going to know who Maurice Hurst is. Was once upon a time viewed as a first-round prospect, falls to like the 6th round. I believe it was the Raiders that drafted him initially because of just kind of injury concerns, and I think he had like a heart issue as well. But he just hasn't been an available player throughout his career. But when he's played, he's shown that he can play. And right now for Cleveland, he's playing some of his best football. And he's in a spot as well. Some of these injury-prone players, it's good to put them in a spot where they're only playing 15 snaps a game. The likelihood of them getting hurt is less than if they were starting full games. But as the third guy off the bench, this is a versatile, do-it-all defensive tackle with a ton of talent. Another kind of cheat code for this defense, honestly, that he's healthy for them. And then Anthony Walker as well has benefited in terms of his run defense with the clearer run lanes that he's getting to see with this improved defensive line in front of him. He's a good linebacker, especially in run defense, and he's playing up to it. Next, let's talk about the LA Chargers. And their star of the month is also going to be a second-round rookie, Tuli Tuipulotu. What a fun start to his season that they've had. I mean, just that Vikings game alone showing off an incredible skill set. 9 pressures, 3 sacks in this game, had 2 sacks on 3 pressures the week before against Tennessee. The kid can play, man. And I love that the Chargers have occasionally lined him up as that rush linebacker in between the tackles, which was a skill set he showed he's got at USC. But for the most part, they are lining him up on the edge, and he's winning. He's winning with finesse. He's winning with power. He has the complete package. He's also incredibly young. He just turned 21 years old. He's been an impact against the run every single week. He's got 11 defensive stops. He's been a full-time starter for them because Bosa just can't stay healthy. He is really off to a good start to his career, and they've desperately needed him on this defense. So I think he was a pretty easy choice for star of the month. But let's talk about the offense a little bit. Joshua Kelly is going to go up. He's producing and deserves this. Specifically week 1 looked pretty good. Came out with 91 yards on 16 carries. But I'm going to be honest, man, ever since then, I continue to just not see it with this player. You talk about running backs being too bouncy and just not hitting holes that are there, and I've consistently seen that with Joshua Kelly. It was something that bothered me about him in his Jags tape, too, in that playoff game last year. So he's going to go up because he's getting a pretty nice workload here, putting up some numbers, making a name for himself, but I'm saying that with a grain of salt because I still think they could have a much better option behind Austin Eckler here. Because the offensive line is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here for this run game, honestly. And Kelly's leaving some meat on the bones of some of those runs. But Keenan Allen was also someone I considered for star of the month. He looks like his old self. And, I had the down arrow on him in my Chargers deep dive. I felt like he was trending in the wrong direction coming off the injury last season. But he is fresh, and they need him right now with Mike Williams getting hurt for the year. But, Keenan Allen had, was it 18 receptions against the Vikings? He's looked awesome. And then Will Clapp has had to step in as Corey Linsley's dealt with another injury this year. And for the second time now, Will Clapp has stepped in as a backup and been adequate as a pass protector. He's a nice little backup to have there. But let's talk about this defense a little bit. I do have some notes on these two edge rushers. Khalil Mack obviously had that huge revenge game against the Raiders last week, 6-sack performance. That's definitely been an anomaly on his Chargers career. You love to see it, but he, for a while now, has been living off of his pedigree in terms of how he's rated here. So if I'm going to bump him up, I need more than 1 week there. But it was a good week. And then Joey Bosa, man, I'm really close to lowering him, man. He can't really stay healthy. He's been, I would say, hit or miss when he has played, but it's difficult to determine how much is health, how much is not health. It's just been a frustrating last really year plus for Joey Bosa. We'll keep an eye on that. But some more guys are going to go down here. Austin Johnson has not been the player they thought they were getting in free agency. He's had even more struggles in run defense this year. The Chargers' run defense has been as bad as ever, and that's saying something. But this is pretty crazy. On 74 run defense snaps, Austin Johnson doesn't even have a single defensive stop. He is getting moved and not getting off blocks at all. And if he is playing like this, his rating is going to keep coming down, but he's going to have to get benched. He's been an absolute liability for them this year. Also offering nothing as a pass rusher either. Just one pressure on 85 pass rush snaps from Austin Johnson. But the linebackers seeing some movement here. Nick Neiman has had to step up. He's had 2 starts. He had a good start against the Vikings, a not-so-good start the week before that, trying to handle Tennessee in that run game. But he has not missed a tackle yet this season. He was an athletic prospect coming out of Iowa, and, we'll see if he can keep playing well if he gets those opportunities, because Eric Kendricks has had a rough start as a Charger here. Not only is he missing games due to injury, but when he's been out there, I did try to warn about this. Watching his Vikings tape last year, he's not the same old Eric Kendricks that I used to swear by as one of the best linebackers in the NFL. He's already a smaller, more slender linebacker that makes it difficult for opponents to feel his presence against the run, if that makes sense. But he's continued to just kind of struggle to get off blocks. He doesn't quite have the same quickness or ability to beat blockers to space so that he's not getting blocked against the run anyway. So that's been hurting him. But it, of course, has been hurting him in coverage as well. So his game just overall continues to decline. And I would not be surprised if he continues to drop as the season goes on, because I just haven't seen it from Eric Kendricks in a while. And then into the secondary, Michael Davis has not lived up to that excellent season he had last year. They have been going directly at him week after week, and he is getting cooked. Already been targeted 32 times this year. He's given up 23 receptions, 286 yards, and 4 touchdowns. The stats speak for themselves there. 8th in the league in yards allowed, and he's played 1 less game than everybody ahead of him. Also, 5 penalties on the season. I mean, a -1 is probably not harsh enough for how he's playing right now, but he really was good last year, so I hope he can turn this thing around. Asante Samuel on the other side, though, is playing really well. Just continues to climb steadily. His playmaking ability is so incredible. He's been a little bit more consistent in terms of coverage this season, and he's been playing the run pretty well as well. So love me some Asante Samuel Jr. And then 2 safeties are going to go up here. Alohi Gilman, who's just, a solid player on the back end, showed off his instincts against the Vikings, had a great game there. A lot of these guys were making these ratings go up on that Vikings game. But Raheem Lane as well had to get that start against the Raiders. Both Derwin and Alohi Gilman were out in that game, and Lane's a guy that they've liked here. He's been around for a year as an undrafted free agent out of Indiana. He played a lot of free safety and was a secure tackler. Wasn't a problem in coverage. No targets, just kind of hanging out back there. But a nice +4 for the kind of no-name safety Raheem Lane out of Indiana. Next up, we have your defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. And, offensively, I feel like they're kind of doing what we mostly expected. Some of these young players, though, are stepping up. Isaiah Pacheco is going to come up +3. He already has forced more missed tackles than he did all of last season, so he's playing with even more confidence and tenacity. His yards after contact have increased. He has not put the ball on the turf yet, which was a slight issue for him last year. He just looks the part. I shouldn't have to explain it. I think a lot of people have enjoyed watching Pacheco, who the best description of him is he runs as if he's trying to punish the ground beneath him, and that's such an accurate description. I guess we skipped over to the star of the month. We'll finish up the offense and then come back to the star of the month. But Rashee Rice has really impressed me. It's starting to feel like I'm going to be wrong about him, which the second he landed with the Kansas City Chiefs, it was kind of like, yeah, he's probably going to work out there. But I will say he looks significantly more explosive than anything I saw from him on his SMU tape. Like, he just does. When he catches the ball, he has explosiveness after the catch that I frankly just didn't see at SMU. And I think part of it is they're using him over the middle of the field where he was better on film, as opposed to SMU, where they just a lot of time just asked him to stack corners on the outside, where I was ridiculously unimpressed by his release and speed on the outside. But once he is kind of like able to be in space, I think he can kind of build up to a nice top speed and has shown some explosiveness. He's also had probably the most reliable pair of hands out of any of these wide receivers here. So Mahomes is starting to develop that trust in Rashee Rice. And another thing I talked about with Rice before he was ever a member of the Kansas City Chiefs was how well he works in scramble drill to work back to the quarterback. And I think some of that chemistry has shown up with Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, Rashee Rice definitely I think is only going to continue to become a bigger part of this Chiefs offense as we go here. But Jawaan Taylor is going to come down. He's pretty well documented at this point. He's already got 11 penalties on the season, which is by far the most of any offensive lineman in the league. And without that kind of early head start and getting a little bit of extra depth in his starting position as he's had in Jacksonville for years, he's just not been as efficient of a pass protector. He hasn't been horrible, although once you put the penalties on top of it, it definitely has hurt this offense quite a bit. So it's been a rough season for Jawaan Taylor, and that is definitely well documented at this point. I think a deserved drop here, and some Chiefs fans might think he needs to come down more. I'm not sure. But yeah, let's talk about this defense that is honestly, I can't say stealing the show, because obviously Kelsey and Taylor Swift is all anybody wants to talk about right now. But the Chiefs defense has really been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for this team to keep these games tight so that Mahomes and Kelsey can finish them off. And a lot of it has been expected performances, guys like Chris Jones and Nick Bolton and some of the guys we know on this defense. But some other guys are stepping up too. Trent McDuffie, the year 2 first-round corner, has been every bit as good as advertised. He is just such a complete player. He's been relatively locked down in terms of coverage as far as the modern game is concerned. Of course, he's going to give up some yardage, but he's grading out incredibly well as a cornerback, holding down the fort in coverage. But he's also been that physical run defender, and just all around is an excellent young corner. And honestly, him and L'Jarius Sneed is one of the more underrated cornerback duos in the entire league right now. But then up front, George Karlaftis is going to go up +2. He was the other first-round pick last year, so this pair of first-rounders from last year are showing some nice returns here in year 2. And even Brian Cook going to go up +1 too. He's we'll talk about him in a minute, but he was a part of that draft class last year as well, on top of some of those day 3 corners that continue to kind of rotate and play well. So these young defenders just continue to be nice key pieces, not even just role players for this defense. But yeah, Karlaftis is up there in terms of pressures in the league right now. He's got 27 pressures, 3 sacks to boot, has just been a much better all-around player than he was in his rookie season, and it's just, you love to see that. Of course, they need some complementary pieces next to Chris Jones. But yeah, Brian Cook has just been solid back there. Nothing special. He's actually missed a few more tackles than you would expect based on his kind of profile coming out of Cincinnati, where he was one of those more kind of run defending prototype strong safeties. But he's been starting and hasn't been getting cooked in coverage, so to speak. Pun unintended there. But yeah, he's going to get a little bit of love here. And then Harrison Butker, the kicker, has been sensational this year. I think the best kicker in the NFL this year so far. Makes that 60-yard kick on Thursday Night Football. He's been automatic. I don't know why EA had him down as a 78 overall, as kind of an average kicker. Maybe he had more of a down year last year than I remember. But yeah, he's up there towards the top for kickers in the NFL. Okay, next up we have the Indianapolis Colts, whose star of the month is going to come from the defensive side of the ball. For all of the talk about how bad this secondary was and how bad they needed cornerbacks and why did this team let Darius Rush go, their 5th round pick? Well, they had something here, second-year player out of Pittsburgh State in Dallas Flowers, who's holding down the fort and some as one of their 2 outside corners. In 4 starts, he has 3 pass breakups, has been pretty good in coverage. They've been targeting him 18 times specifically, and he's given up just 11 receptions, 115 yards. He's just been a pretty solid corner out there. He's got length. They love these kind of traits-based small school prospects, and it does seem they've found a contributor here out of Pittsburgh State. But let's talk about this offense a little bit. Anthony Richardson, the rookie quarterback, I think has checked every box in the small sample sizes that we've gotten from him. Now, unfortunately, has not been able to stay healthy. But I do think when it comes to his ability to see the field, get his eyes in the right place, and just his overall decision-making, his pocket presence, he's just been very sound. He definitely hasn't been perfect. There's been some inaccurate throws. There's been some questionable decisions, but nothing overly concerning. I think you're encouraged by what we've seen from him so far, and hopefully they can get him back healthy for the second half of the season. But in the meantime, they have probably the best backup quarterback in the NFL right now, Gardner Minshew, who I think is playing better than a handful of starters in the NFL. And his comfort within this offense as well is really, really impressive. He's been a really good distributor. He's provided some play extension when stuff isn't there on third downs to move the chains. So he's a competitive quarterback, deserves a little +2 love here. He's got a revenge game coming this weekend against his former team in Jacksonville. Then Zach Moss is going to go up, who really stepped in nicely with Jonathan Taylor waiting on that contract extension. A pair of 100-yard games for Zach Moss. He's making defenders miss. He's even showing a little bit of breakaway speed. He's contributing in the receiving game. Probably looks like one of the better backup running backs in the league at this point in time. And then Josh Downs, the rookie wide receiver, really not a surprise to anybody who watched him coming out of North Carolina. I think everybody felt that he was a better prospect than a third-round pick and that this was one of the steals of the draft, and he has shown out right away. His hands consistency is excellent, just like in college. Not only that he has no drops on 30 targets, but he's 3 for 3 on contested looks too. He just has amazing ball skills, even though he doesn't have the frame. He's getting open. He, to me, is set to potentially lead this team in overall receiving yards this year with how he's kind of stepped in. And, week 1, it was like all Michael Pittman. But a lot of those kind of easy targets that went towards Pittman are now going towards Downs. And he just really is poised for a nice career. He's a really good player from the slot. Then both of these young tight ends have impressed, especially Andrew Ogletree, who has surprisingly been up there in terms of total snap counts for these tight ends. They have a bunch of different bodies, guys like, Mo Alley Cox and Kylan Granson. But Ogletree's been the guy. He's been their best tight end. He's been their best blocker, really. He's been their most reliable receiver. This is another one of these kind of traits-based small school guys. I think he was Youngstown State, if my memory serves me right. They liked him. He got hurt last year in camp, but making a surprise impact early on, and he definitely just looks the part out there. And then Will Mallory as well, this speedy tight end out of Miami. He hasn't played a lot, only 11 snaps this year. He might be hurt because he only played in that one game against Houston. But in that game, they got him 2 nice targets, 2 nice catches in that game, and deserves a little bit of love for that performance against Houston. And then on the offensive line, these guys are playing really well. I mean, this was a big issue with this team last year, so it's a big deal to see these guys playing well, especially Bernard Raymond, just getting more and more comfortable week in, week out. Obviously, the 24-year-old third-round pick out of Central Michigan who's kind of new to football was a bit of a polarizing prospect coming out, but surely was a more talented player than a third-round pick. And he may have had his struggles early on, but man alive, he's been really good for about his last 10 starts or so, including his 3 starts this year, though he has missed a couple of games in there. But in each of his 3 starts, pretty much locked down at left tackle. You love to see that. They got to get him back out there because the rookie Blake Freeland is going through some of those early season woes that Bernard Raymond went through last year. But Freeland is not the prospect that Raymond was, in my opinion. But then Will Fries, the right guard, has been okay. He struggled in that Aaron Donald matchup, but he's been all right. He's been moving people in the run game, so he's going to go up 1. And then you got the center, Ryan Kelly, is off to the best start in his career. He's been through a lot the last few years, combining injuries and the tragic loss of his daughter. But if he's kind of, I hate to say refocused, because obviously it was a horrible thing that happened, but, if he's got his mind in the right place, maybe is the socially acceptable way to put it. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? He might be tuned in and just simply playing his best football. But he's going to go up, the former first-round pick out of Alabama. And then let's talk a little bit more about the defense. Samson Ebukam, this signing's been awesome. He hasn't necessarily been dominating his one-on-one pass rush snaps necessarily. He's been pretty good in that regard. I would say just as good as he was in San Francisco. But his overall physical presence has been a spark plug for this Colts team. He just kind of ignites this unit when it comes to running stunts and bringing some meanness. That's probably a lack of a better word there, but he really does bring some intensity in the run game, and you just kind of feel his presence. He's going to go up 1 there. And then with these linebackers, I think we have to drop Shaquille Leonard. He's missing some time, but on top of that, when he has played, he just hasn't been an impact, really. He's done okay. I don't think he's a bad player. He's still so smart and, a high-intensity player at linebacker, but I do think he's not moving really as well as he once did. He's not making an impact in coverage. He's less involved against the run, and it's to the point where they're actually rotating him off the field in certain packages. Zaire Franklin has actually been their true 3-down starter here. So I just, he's not the superstar that he once was, and I think most Colts fans are in agreement there on Shaq Leonard. But then you got Zaire Franklin, who is going to go up 1. He has been a menace against the run. I really like Zaire Franklin. He's just a good player for them. And then some more guys in the secondary. They still have work to go in terms of making this a quote-unquote good secondary, but these guys are playing well, and I could see a future where especially these 3 corners maybe are the sort of starters into next season, if you will. But Juju Brents, their high second-round pick, has lived up to his expectations, was such a kind of seamless scheme fit where the Colts are the one kind of remaining true Seattle cover 3 system. They love these big, lengthy zone corners, and that's what Juju Brents was. And he's plugged right in. He's missed some time, but when he's played, he's been very effective on the outside and really getting involved at a high level as a run defender as well. So he looks good. Kenny Moore as well, with just some more stability around. I think he's playing more comfortable and has been getting put in a position to succeed. He's made a couple plays in coverage. He's been tackling better. Looks a little bit more like the old Kenny Moore, in my opinion. Same with Julian Blackmon. Had a beautiful interception against the Titans, but he's been back out there and playing pretty well as of late. Definitely a player in a contract year that has potential that really hasn't played well since his rookie year. So it's really good to see that as well for the Colts. So it's been a good month for Indianapolis as they've kind of established themselves as a real football team again after a rough season last year. But then the Miami Dolphins, I think the star of the month can be no one other than Devon Achane. The A-Train here, I mean, he has been a marvel of a rookie running back here, a third-round pick that the second he got taken, he was probably the one draft pick that I think all draft enthusiasts were like, ooh, a running back with 4.3 speed goes to guess who? The Miami Dolphins. And whether you're a running back or a wide receiver at this point, Mike McDaniel has shown you that he can take your raw speed, point you in the right direction, get you in space, and make the most of it. But Achane would not be able to be as consistent as he's been, and if it weren't for, real running back traits. We've seen plenty of track stars at the running back position that aren't as capable as Achane here. He's got legit patience and vision. He's able to change his pace to set up angles and find holes. And he's also making defenders miss, whether that's running through arm tackles or making guys miss in space. 15 missed tackles forced on his limited opportunities, especially down in the red zone when things have gotten into shorter areas. And it's not so much about speed, it's about toughness and grit. And he has converted some really difficult looks down there. So he is more than just a small, speedy scat back. He's just an all-around player. And for a guy that's, only gotten 38 rushing attempts, I mean, a +6 on that many looks is pretty damn impressive for those that have followed this series. He's been just incredible. But there's a lot of other guys stepping up for this offense. Obviously, Tua, I think, has continued to show us really, I think, just who he is. And I've accepted that he's going to put the ball in harm's way because of his play style. He throws with more anticipation and I would say confidence in what he's seeing than anybody else. And maybe 90% of the time, it's going to lead to these beautiful throws where he's hitting the top of his drop and the ball is getting out and he's dropping it somewhere where, the receiver hasn't even began his break sometimes, or the opening isn't even there. Like, he really has this incredible anticipation. Now, there is a trade-off there. You're going to get some ugly throws where he makes the wrong call on those difficult decisions, and it ends up right in the laps of the defender. And I think once you accept that, it becomes a lot more beautiful to watch Tua's game, and it does remind me so much of Phillip Rivers, who I was very fond of over the years. So I've come around on Tua. Despite his limitations, I think he's a really good quarterback, especially within this system, of course. And then the other running back, Raheem Mostert, he's himself is going to get a +3. I mean, he's completely evolved his game. He still has that long speed, but he's put on weight. He's tough and breaking tackles. He's a really good back for them in his own right. And then on the offensive line, these guys have stepped up. Kendall Lamb has had to play left tackle because Teron Armstead has missed the majority of the season, and he's held up pretty well. Austin Jackson at right tackle as well is having a career year for him so far, the former first-round pick. We'll continue to see if those guys can hold up throughout the course of the season. I think a lot of these game scripts against bad pass rushes have helped them a little bit. And I think Tua's play style really helps them out too, where the ball's getting out so quick that they don't have to hold up that long. But for where we're at right now, these guys are not an issue for this offensive line, as on paper they looked like they might have been heading into the year. But the center, Connor Williams, continues to play really good football. This signing has really been a match made in heaven from the beginning. His transition all the way from tackle in college to guard in Dallas and now center here in Miami has been virtually seamless, other than some bad snaps in there that seem like they're continuing to work through. But his run blocking in a heavy wide zone centric blocking scheme is so seamless for him. He's such a great athlete. He's got a natural core strength and is an awesome run blocker. And they're able to shelter his deficiencies in pass protection, not just being a center where he gets more double team opportunities, but also within this system. So he's just a really nice fit. He's playing like a top 5 to 8 center in the NFL, I would say, since he got to Miami. And then back to the defensive side of the ball. On the interior defensive line, we got some shakeup. Deshaun Hand, the player that 6 years ago had a breakout rookie season as a mid-round pick for the Detroit Lions, and then just fell off the face of the planet. A talented player out of Alabama. One of the weirder, just dramatic fall-offs for a breakout rookie that I can remember. But he's getting some rotational reps. He's defending the run well in this system, so he's going to get some love. And then another Alabama defensive tackle is playing well here. I checked some numbers on him, and something I talked about with Raekwon Davis in the Dolphins deep dive is how I hated how they asked him to play nose tackle in the previous kind of Belichick style system, because he just can't get leverage against double teams. He's 6'7", was 290 pounds coming into the league. He's up to like 315 now. But, he's got long arms and instincts to shed blocks and stuff, but he just could not hold up as a nose tackle. And they had him playing about 60+% of his snaps as a nose tackle in the previous scheme. Well, now it's down significantly, down to like 20% or so. Playing a lot more kind of 2-tech, 3-tech, seeing less double teams in this system, and he is playing better against the run. He hasn't been great, but he's definitely holding up much better. And then off the edge, Andrew Van Ginkel is on a mission. Now, something that I noticed kind of evaluating these edge players, which we'll talk about this with Bradley Chubb as well, is, Van Ginkel and Chubb are having really nice seasons, but their big games have come against the Giants and Patriots offensive lines, which are outliers in terms of just how truly horrible they are. So I want to take this with a grain of salt. I want to see Chubb and Van Ginkel play like this against better offensive lines before we get too crazy here. But with that said, Andrew Van Ginkel is already past his 2022 total in pressures and sacks. All of last season, he had 11 pressures and 1 sack. This year, in Fangio's defense, he's got 18 pressures and 4 sacks. I mean, he's been winning with all sorts of pass rush moves too. So he just looks like a different player than he's been in years past. Bradley Chubb, on the other hand, he had a horrible week 1 game, so much that I was calling him out on the podcast, and then has been better since. But again, his 2 good games have come really against the Giants and Patriots. So he's due for a boost. I just have got to see it against better competition there. Because in 5 games right now, 12 of his 18 pressures have come in those 2 matchups, and all 3 of his sacks, by the way. But then into the secondary, these guys have had to step up with Jalen Ramsey out, and Kader Coho just continues to be a pretty solid player. He had a rough day against the Buffalo Bills, but in his other starts outside of that, I think he's been pretty good. I like Kader Coho. He's probably not ever going to be a superstar or anything, but I think he's a solid corner. Even Justin Bethel had to get a start in there. 33-year-old journeyman veteran type special teamer, but had to get in there week 3, I think. Yeah, week 3 had the start as a slot corner against Denver and had to play against Buffalo too. He's been all right. He deserves a little bit of love there. And then both these safeties have been outstanding. A couple of notes here. I mean, we talked about Javon Holland getting to play now in this Fangio-style system where it's a lot more quarters and split safety stuff. And we've talked time and time again about how players with slot cornerback experience thrive in these types of systems. Javon Holland played slot corner at Oregon, was really excited to see how he was going to play in this system, and it has been marvelous. He might be playing the best safety out of anyone not named Jesse Bates right now. He's been shut down in coverage, has 3 pass breakups on the year, and he's been really nice coming downfield, making defensive stops, making himself felt within this system. They've really needed him in the kind of spine of the defense there, and he's been outstanding. And then another thing here, I'm really encouraged that they didn't stand by Brandon Jones. No disrespect. I mean, it is kind of disrespectful, but one of the most questionable things that this Dolphins team has done in previous regimes to me is standing by Brandon Jones, their other safety here, who just has not been a good football player. I was curious when they signed Deshaun Elliott how the new staff would feel, and Brandon Jones has been delegated to a rotational backup role, and Deshaun Elliott, the experienced safety, has been starting, and he's playing really, really well here. Likewise with Javon Holland, has been filling against the run really well, and he's been pretty sound in coverage as well. So good on this staff, in my opinion, for starting the correct Texas safety here in Deshaun Elliott, and that's going to do it for the Dolphins here. And then we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, a little bit less movement for them for one reason or another here to start the season, but the left tackle Walker Little is going to be the star of the month. Now, I know he got hurt in London. I haven't heard an update there, but regardless, the first 4 weeks of his season have been incredible here, and he ended up starting over Cam Robinson in that London game because he's been so good at left tackle. They went with, if it ain't broke, don't fix it there. And I mean, he's just a player I've really liked going back to the draft, someone that once upon a time was viewed as a potential top 10 pick and then had some injuries and I believe some COVID-related stuff, kind of derailed his Stanford career, but a really meticulous, methodical pass protector and has improved since he came to the league. I really think they got a steal here in Walker Little and a franchise left tackle. So again, just stay healthy, and he's checked every box to me since he's come into the league, and that's been really meaningful for them, given they have a rookie at right tackle and they had Robinson suspended for the first 4 weeks of this season. But it's not all good for the offensive line. Both of these interior pieces, the young center Luke Fortner and the sort of journeyman veteran Tyler Shatley, have struggled pretty immensely in pass protection this season. Both of those guys are going to see reductions in their ratings here this week, and anyone that's watched the Jags play has just not felt great about that interior pass protection. And the right tackle, Anton Harrison, he's not going to go down. He wasn't rated particularly high, but he hasn't played all that well either. Maybe worth noting that Brandon Sheriff, after avoiding a pretty big injury scare in week 1, has played okay at right guard. But yeah, they're going through it on the old line right now. Some good, some bad. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. Josh Allen, the edge. Josh Allen, he has had such a kind of satisfying career trajectory. It just feels like it's been a steady climb for him. Not always consistent like week to week, but this year he's kind of been there week in, week out. He's yet again increasing his pressure rate and all that stuff. Really the only guy on this D-line playing well right now. I can't imagine what they'd look like right now without his 20 pressures and 6 sacks that he has right now. But then you go to the secondary, and Darius Williams, boy, has this kind of aged to be true from everything we've said about him since the Jags signed him. I was so worried when they signed him that they would play him in the slot and typecast him as a 5'9" corner, and they did for the first half of last season, and he saw some falling in this series early last year, but ever since they put him back outside, he's been climbing back up, and now he is back, I believe, to the same rating I would have had on him to when he signed there. He has been outstanding as a perimeter corner for the Jaguars, continuing to break the stereotype around the NFL that you have to have length to play on the outside. You can do it with plenty of different traits, and Darius Williams has speed, acceleration, technique, instincts, you name it. He's just a good perimeter corner. And then the safety, Andre Sisco, continues to get better and better. His impact and consistency coming down against the run has been phenomenal, but he also has 2 interceptions, and another pass breakup to boot. He is a high upside day 3 safety that definitely looks like he's trending towards being not just a quality starter, but a potential stud for this defense. But now let's talk about the New York Jets. What a interesting month of football it's been for them. Let's start with the star of the month, Quincy Williams. He's been a huge pleasant surprise for this defense, and it's crazy because if you kind of circled the worst player on paper for this defense heading into the year, or at least the least consistent player, you'd probably say Quincy Williams. But he's still been a fun player going back to last year. He's Quinton Williams' brother. He was a former 3rd-round pick for the Jags out of Murray State with a ton of athleticism and loves to hit people and fly around. But this year, he has seen really massive gains in his just consistency within this system now for another year. He's getting to the ball at a better level. He's not missing as many tackles. He's been around the ball in coverage as well. He just looks outstanding. And, let's just continue down the road of this defense, and then we'll shift back to the offense. But with him playing so well and so explosive, and CJ Mosley playing as well as he's playing right now, who's been just a force against the run and the total heart and soul of this defense, the Jets, we know them for their D-line, we know them for their secondary, but this is one of the more underrated linebacking groups in the NFL right now too. But also Bryce Huff, our dude on this channel, is going to go up another one. We've loved Bryce Huff on this show for a long time, and it is fascinating that this team didn't really endorse him. They spend that 1st-round pick on Will McDonald. They don't lock Bryce Huff into a contract extension, even though he's been showing now since he's been with the Jets that every time they give him an opportunity, he gets after the quarterback. And Bryce Huff right now is 8th in the NFL in total pressures. But what's crazy is he's got 26 pressures on only 87 pass rush snaps. So he just comes off the bench with his hair on fire. I mean, everyone else really like north of 15 pressures outside of Rashawn Gary, who's also been in kind of a pitch count role right now. Everyone else is looking at 120, 150, 180 pass rush snaps. Bryce Huff way less than that, down there at 87. Just the 1 sack, but he has definitely just popped on film, and the numbers back it up. So definitely going to be fascinating to see what sort of contract does a guy like this demand, who came into the league as an undrafted free agent that many in the draft community especially had pinpointed as at least a 3rd, 4th round talent, and were offended that he didn't receive a combine invite. But a player that the team didn't really endorse him before the year. They tried to replace him with Will McDonald, who's not seeing the field right now. And Bryce Huff just continues to check every box, just as he did in college. So definitely a name you want to keep an eye on here throughout the rest of the season, and potentially into free agency as well. That rounds out the defensive conversations. We do have some ups and downs with this offense, to say the least. Dalvin Cook looks horrible. Man, he really does. No explosiveness at all. He's had a fumble this year. Just 2.7 yards per attempt. It's been tough to watch, man. It's actually hilarious because, as we mentioned, these are Madden ratings. They still have him as a superstar X factor, which means he's one of the best at his position. It's pretty funny how off that was here. He's not that dude anymore. In fact, he's probably not even a better runner than Michael Carter right now, who comes in off the bench. But on the other hand, Breece Hall looks awesome. He looks like he's fully recovered from that ACL. His game against the Broncos was just so awesome. He's got that down-to-down consistency you look for, where he can churn out tough 4 or 5 yard runs and show good vision and patience. But if he does get a lane, he can hit a second gear and, have home run hitting ability. He doesn't have truly insane speed necessarily, but he definitely has enough to pull away for 30, 40, 50, 60 yards, as we saw in that Broncos game. So, he looks every bit as good as advertised. And then Randall Cobb's going to come down. Not only is he 33 years old, but he no longer gets to play with that Aaron Rodgers third down chemistry where he's kind of made plays for the Packers over the last couple of years. He's had drops. He's barely creating any separation or anything after the catch. He just has not been an asset to this Jets team, minus Aaron Rodgers. But these tight ends have played well. Even CJ Uzomah, who's not listed here, has played pretty well, but Tyler Conklin just continues to catch everything. He's going to go up +1. And then Jeremy Ruckert is getting out there as well. He's been outstanding as a blocker when they want to get into 12 personnel. But in the last couple of weeks, they've thrown him the ball. He's converted those catch opportunities, and looks like a nice kind of tight end 2, tight end 3 piece in a pretty good balanced tight end room there. And then on the interior offensive line, Joe Tippmann is going to go up. He did struggle in pass protection in one of his games against the Broncos, but has been otherwise fine in pass pro and really pretty good as a run blocker. So the second round pick there definitely looks the part out of Wisconsin. And then we just have some notes on a couple of these other offensive players. Zach Wilson, rated as a 67 right now, I think is pretty much spot on. He's played pretty well the last couple of weeks. Definitely looks better than he ever has. But that 67 grade alone was too high based on how he's played lately and was really there based on his physical tools and draft pedigree. So he's starting to play up to that rating now. We'll see if he can continue it. And if he's playing at this level for the next 4 or 5 weeks, the Jets are going to win games, and he can definitely be a candidate for like star of the month for this month of October coming up. But let's talk about Mekhi Becton real quick as well. Another player whose rating as a 75 is something that's basically been there based on pedigree and how he looked as a rookie. But he now getting to play left tackle after starting a couple games at right tackle early in the year. Left tackle is his natural position, I think. And he's played up to his rating the last couple weeks rather. And I think another guy that if he can continue to play like this and stay healthy, he will climb. And those two guys playing well these last couple weeks has been a huge part of their ability to obviously beat the Broncos, but to compete against the Chiefs as well. Those would be some huge luxuries for this Jets team to have. Those are their biggest question marks right now, probably our tackle and quarterback. Then I guess we have to talk about the New England Patriots, who I think have been the most depressing team in the NFL this year, right next to the New York Giants. But let's get through this. Let's start on a good note. I mean, their first-round corner, Christian Gonzalez, looked fantastic, was genuinely one of the more lockdown corners in the NFL for the first couple of weeks right out the gate. But as I mentioned, things are depressing right now. He's done for the year, so this is all he's going to get, but going to get a little bit of love before, not playing the rest of the year here, but looks great. I mean, I can't wait to see him next year back for the Patriots. But pretty much everybody else here is going to be going down. Mac Jones looks horrible. He's kind of just like freeballing the offense at this point. It just does not feel like a culture fit with Mac Jones at this point. He's putting the ball in harm's way. He's not elevating this offense that doesn't have a whole lot for him to work with, but he's compounding it with bad play himself. So he's going to come down. Ramondre Stevenson's going to come down. There was big expectations that he could kind of burst onto the scene maybe as like a top 10 back, and his just all-around efficiency is plummeting here. And on top of that, he seems like he's making mental mistakes every week, and he was a fascinating guy coming out of Oklahoma. I don't remember necessarily if he had like off-field concerns or something, but he fell later in the draft than his film would have suggested. And right now, like, he's not looking when they call toss plays, and he's dropping flare routes into the flat. Like, he's just had some mental mistakes this year, not necessarily fumbles, but it just has not been the year we kind of all expected, honestly, from Stevenson. But then with the wide receivers, Devontae Parker is going to go up. He's going to fall down one, along with Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, everything's kind of compounding and just not working here. I still think Parker in the right spot can be a good kind of perimeter possession receiver, or an X, so to speak. But, here he's not able to provide any separation, and that's a rough starting point. And the lack of efficiency from him has been concerning. And then Juju Smith-Schuster's just straight up kind of been bad. He's had drops and has not been able to get open over the middle. He's on a pretty bad contract at this point. I think Kansas City sheltered a lot of his weaknesses as a wide receiver. So that signing's looking like a pretty big mistake for the Patriots. Now, the Demario Douglas pick has been all right. He's been getting out there, and he is like the one speed receiver they have right now, and they're doing a good job kind of scheming him into space, and he's converted some looks when they've gone his way, so at least some positivity there. But then back to the negative on the offensive line. Calvin Anderson was brought in as offensive tackle depth. He's had to play because Riley Reiff has been injured, and he's been a turnstile, so that's been bad. David Andrews has been giving up a lot more pressures than we're used to from him. I think part of that is the lack of guards next to him, because right now you've got just, day 3 rookies starting at guard that are getting worked on this O-line. But yeah, Andrews himself is losing, so he's going to come down. He is getting up there in age, so it could be some extra regression on top of all that. But then as you look at the defense, there are going to be a couple guys that are playing well here. Jelani Tavai continues to be a really good fit here. The Patriots love these big, thumping linebackers that can get nasty at the line of scrimmage. Tavai was drafted by Matt Patricia in Detroit for that same scheme fit. And it's been a few years later coming over to New England where it's working out. But, he's kind of in that sort of, it's high praise, but that Hightower / Jawan Bentley, a Landon Roberts mold. He's playing well. He's been a physical force and a good tackler in the middle of that defense. And then they did acquire J.C. Jackson, who's obviously just had a catastrophic fall from grace since leaving New England. Now we'll see if kind of returning here can get him back to playing well. But in the first game with the Patriots here, he did not play well as kind of a rotational corner. I'm still cautiously optimistic that he can get things back on track here in New England, but he's going to have to show that and climb back up in this series before we treat him like his old self. And then Jabril Peppers has kind of taken over the Adrian Phillips role, which is fascinating to me. They've kind of flipped. Peppers had the minor snap count last year as opposed to Adrian Phillips, who played a lot more. This year, it seems the other way around, and Peppers has even played some free safety for them along with Jalen Mills as they've looked for that replacement for Devin McCourty. So his role within this defense is changing, but it's for the better. He is a freaky athlete, one of the top recruited, if not the top recruited prospects in his recruiting class in high school, and he's just been kind of a positionless player for a while. But with New England and the way they call this defense with their sort of movable safeties on the back end, he's been a dream fit, and he's got speed. He will light you up coming downfield. He forced that fumble on Jalen Hurts at the end of that week 1 game that was just really a marvelous play. So he's a really kind of positive story for a team that's looking for those desperately. Even the kicker, the rookie kicker, is struggling here, Chad Ryland, so he's going to come down too. But yeah, it's been tough for Pats fans. We got through it, though. We'll see if we can get through the season. And then we have the LA Raiders. The star of the month, I think, has to be Max Crosby, who it's time he gets his flowers as being up there with Nick Bosa. And it's come full circle because early in his career, Raiders fans were like, Max Crosby is as good as Nick Bosa. They came into the league together. And of course, at the time, we're both, playing in the Bay Area. And at the time, it was like, that's insane. Max Crosby had this ridiculously high pressure to sack percentage. He was not getting after the quarterback at the rate that Nick Bosa was. But and this is not a dig at Nick Bosa. He was my pick for Defensive Player of the Year last year, by the way. But Max Crosby, he's gotten sober, and the last 2 years, he has really shown us that he's just not the same player that he was coming into the league. And he was a good player coming to the league as a 4th-round pick, don't get me wrong. But he has shown that he has the athleticism to be a tier 1 edge rusher. He has get off, he has speed. Just watch him chase down the quarterback when they break the pocket, or watch him win the corner on his speed rush. He's got enough bend, I would say, to suffice. But because he has the speed and the length and the size, he can win with power too. And, I made that Max Crosby edge rush video like 2 seasons ago. And really, since then, he has taken all of those traits that I highlighted in that video, if you want to go back and watch, and packaged it into, seriously, the production that matches that of a Bosa, of a Garrett, Parsons. He is really on that level. He's taking over games for this defense, and it's just funny that people think the Raiders would trade Max Crosby, which is just stupid. You don't trade Max Crosby. He is the face of this defense, and the only reason this defense is competitive. He's incredible, and it's been fun to give him his respect throughout his career. So there's that. Let's talk about the offense a little bit. I would say there haven't been a lot of surprises with this offense. They've been just kind of bland. But it is time to nuke Hunter Renfrow a little bit. Like, I can't fully explain why they don't use him, but it's also at a point where he's, dropping passes in a way that he never has. He's just not able to present himself to this offense. And last year, it was kind of more of the same. He was also dealing with some injuries, and I didn't really want to lower his rating. And I still feel like a team could acquire him in the right scheme fit, and he could be a good slot option. But it is at the point in my mind that he's got to show it again before we give him credit back as one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. So he's been an interesting player and a difficult guy to kind of grade out over the last 2 seasons, really. But then on the offensive line, Jermaine Illuminor, who had that pleasant breakout last season, has had more of a rough start to his season. Still fine, but not that lockdown pass protector that he was last year. So he's just going to come down a little bit. I still think he's a fine player. But Dylan Parham, one of my breakout candidates this year, he continues to play really well. He's climbing up their left guard out of Memphis, who I really like. And then how about this Greg Van Roten pickup? Man, the Raiders' offensive line coach, Carmen Bracilio, just kind of keeps getting away with this. Van Roten at, 34 years old, is producing like one of the best pass-protecting offensive linemen in the NFL right now. I don't know if that's sustainable. He's been kind of a journeyman veteran, but he has started games throughout his career and had some pretty good seasons. But right now, he's off to the best start of his career. And, with modern sports science, some of these linemen are playing well into their 30s. It's possible that they just found a Pro Bowl caliber guy that was ready to kind of break out when given an opportunity as a starter here. I don't know. We'll see, but he is playing well and deserves plenty of praise there. And then the center, Andre James, too, just continues to steadily get better as a pretty solid player. This was kind of John Gruden's parting wish to this organization, was his guy. Andre James out of nowhere has climbed into being one of the more league average starters in the league. Like, he's probably center number 15 at this point in time. But let's talk about this defense as well. Besides Max Crosby, they've had some fun performances. I mean, Malcolm Kuntz has really stepped up in a way that they weren't maybe expecting. I mean, they draft Tyree Wilson, obviously, in the top 10, and then the whole Chandler Jones things happens. They've desperately needed anybody that can do anything off the edge. And Malcolm Kuntz, while limited in sample size, has done that. He's had some really impressive pass rush wins. He was a 3rd-round pick and has a variety of different ways he can win. He can get under your pads and bull rush you a little bit and has some bend and pass rush moves. So I think he's checked a lot of boxes and playing well. He's getting a +3 here this week. And part of that is Tyree Wilson has just not been able to contribute here. And you got to be worried about Wilson at this point. I mean, 4 pressures in 5 games, no sacks. He's been horrible. He's not even defending the run well. There's really nothing to say here other than he just has to be better, man. I'm not ready to say bust or anything like that, and I like Tyree Wilson as a prospect, but he had some questionable injury stuff pre-draft. He wasn't able to test. His production profile was curious coming out of Texas Tech, where he was kind of a one-year wonder. I don't know. I have nothing against Tyree Wilson. I liked this draft pick when they made it. I would love for him to work out, but it just has screamed disaster from the beginning. Since really the second they drafted him, honestly, he just hasn't been available and hasn't produced when he's been there. But behind the edge group, they have some guys stepping up too. Robert Spillane was a nice signing from Pittsburgh. I mean, this guy can play. He forced his way onto the field ahead of Devin Bush and Miles Jack in Pittsburgh. And, Pittsburgh just kind of ended up letting all these guys go. I think they probably should have kept Robert Spillane because he makes plays, man. He's got good instincts to find the ball. He's aggressive against the run. He's just a good all-around linebacker. Has found a nice home with a team that believes in him as a starter. And next to him, he's got Divine Diablo, who's a really nice compliment. Converted safety, come out of Virginia Tech. We knew it was going to be a little bit of I don't know if I want to say a project, but definitely a learning curve for him to become a good player. And we're getting closer to that time where, he's seeing the game well from that linebacker position. He's tackling much more consistent than he ever has. He's been in good position in coverage, which is not a surprise given his profile as a safety in college. But he is a really fun player. Been flying around. It's been hard to watch a Raiders game without noticing Divine Diablo. Still one of the best names in the league by far. But then with the secondary, Nate Hobbs, unfortunately, did get hurt after week 3. But did start well. He's just been a good player when he's been healthy. Playing in the slot this year, has been really good against the run, really good in coverage, just an all-around good football player. And then Amik Robertson has stepped in really since Hobbs got hurt, and he had that game-winning interception against the Packers. He's been very solid. He's one of these 5'8" corners that is better on the outside, and they're playing him on the outside right now, and he's contributing. And him plus Marcus Peters, who's been solid, and Nate Hobbs in the slot is a very serviceable cornerback room for a team that has been looking for a serviceable cornerback room for a long time. And then Trayvon Merrick, their second-round pick from a few years ago, is off to a really good start back there at safety. Looks comfortable in year 2 of Patrick Graham's defense. He's tackling better. He's playing faster. He's making plays in coverage. A talented player that had a down year last year and is getting things back on track this year. All right, next up, the Baltimore Ravens. Star of the month is going to be none other than Roquan Smith, though I did consider Lamar as well. But I came into the year saying Fred Warner was in a tier of his own as a linebacker in the NFL, and through 5 weeks, Roquan Smith is actually outplaying him. Part of that is Fred Warner, as we talked about in the NFC episode last week, has been missing some tackles, but who is this Roquan Smith? And I say that with the absolute most respect for Roquan. I had him as a blue chip prospect, loved him on the Bears and all that, but he was never this guy that Chicago gave up on. I mean, his just completeness, for lack of a better word, as a linebacker has blown me away here in Baltimore. Like, he's thumping against the run. He looks thick. Like, that wasn't the Georgia Roquan. Like, just look at a picture of Georgia Roquan compared to who he is now. He's put on so much play strength, and it's allowed him to thrive around the line of scrimmage. And he really hasn't traded that much sideline to sideline speed with that. Like, his physical training is really impressive, but his mind for the game is reaching that elite point as well. His game against the Cleveland Browns was one of the best linebacker performances I've seen in a long, long time, especially in terms of coverage. Just his ability to patrol that middle of the field and shut down everything sideline to sideline, because that was the Dorian Thompson-Robinson game. They were trying to get these quick hitters to the flat and just put the ball in the playmaker's hands, and Roquan was shutting everything down. So, I mean, he's just truly a special player, and I'm just impressed, man. I think you can definitely argue that he's up there with Fred Warner right now, and he's playing better than him through the first 5 weeks of the year. So I wanted to highlight that as the star of the month, but Lamar Jackson deserves his flowers as well. People, this take has been kind of going around the echo chamber. I've heard it on a couple podcasts this week, but Lamar's performance this year is why PFF exists, where he's playing incredibly well, but the production hasn't been there because he's dealing with just an immense amount of drops and frustrating things around him. But pretty much everything that Ravens fans have been saying about Lamar, and just kind of from an outsider perspective, what we've wanted to see from Lamar in terms of what does he look like in a spread style offense, in a pro style offense, this has pretty much been, I mean, I would say it's about as close to as good as you could have imagined. He's making good decisions with the football. He's been accurate throwing the ball deep and outside the numbers, which has been something he struggled with in Greg Roman's offense. And then the pocket presence paired with his athleticism has been a complete handful for opposing defenses. And Ravens fans, I don't know if you agree with me on this or not, but he doesn't even look like the old Lamar Jackson in terms of athleticism. When I did this rating here for Madden, I actually lowered his speed and all of that stuff. He doesn't look to be quite the same, and part of that is he's put on some functional muscle to help him stay healthy, and potentially improve his arm talent too. I don't know, but he's been such a better true quarterback on this team, and he's really impressed me. I think he's a legitimate MVP candidate. And then it's been very up and down around him in terms of the rest of the offense. Justice Hill has stepped up with some splash plays, showing off some spin moves and creativity down in the red zone to help them convert some touchdowns. He's been all right. I wouldn't say he's been perfect stepping in for J.K. Dobbins, but him and Gus Edwards kind of have that thunder and lightning thing going a little bit right now. But Rashad Bateman, the former first-round pick, he, to me, seems to have lost all of that confidence that he played with at Minnesota. He kind of had that my ball bitch mentality, got some kind of Michael Thomas comparisons coming out of Minnesota, and he's just not that guy anymore. And a big part of that is he has no confidence in his hands. He's had horrible drop issues since he's come into the league. He's been injured. I don't think he trusts his body necessarily. It's just been a really rough couple of years for Rashad Bateman, and I hope he can turn it around, but it is not looking good right now. Fortunately for the Ravens, their new first-round wide receiver looks awesome. I know he had the big drops last week, and he's got to clean those up. That was a part of his profile at Boston College. But other than this most recent week, he's been awesome, man. He's been threatening all three levels of the defense, short, intermediate, and deep. He's come down with tough catches. It's just concentration drops that are the issue for him. The run after catch is just so special. The way he glides and can weave through traffic is really impressive. So he definitely looks the part. I would say looks like the best rookie wide receiver not named Puka Nacua right now. And then Mark Andrews really struggling this year. 4 drops this year. It's just he hasn't been reliable. It's been bad to say the least. He has got to come down. And what's frustrating is he's had these moments throughout his career where, the main difference between him and like Kelsey in a lot of ways, I mean, this is probably a bad take, but the thing that's keeping him out of that top tier of tight ends basically is he has these spurts of inconsistency and drops, and he's going through it right now. He's got to come down. And then the center, Sam Mustipher, has stepped up. A couple of nice starts with Tyler Linderbaum out. He started every game for the Bears last year, I think. And he's just a solid backup, kind of a replacement level option there. And then some more guys for this defense are playing well. Travis Jones, the incredibly talented young defensive tackle out of UConn, who I thought was one of the steals of the draft last year. He continues to check every box in terms of his ability to contribute as a run defender. And what's nice is Michael Pierce is staying healthy next to him, and he's been, I think, a very good influence on his productivity and development. And then Jadeveon Clowney, credit to him, man. He's been a much-needed impact for this edge group, always been hurt, and David Ojabo just is not quite ready. So not only did they need a guy to just step in and play and eat reps, but Clowney's having one of his better years in a while. It's just a natural fit here. I wish he picked a better jersey number because the aesthetic of him playing for the Baltimore Ravens is actually just kind of makes sense. But wearing number 24, it's like, I want to throw up all over myself. Can we get that changed, please? Because if he was wearing 90 or something, I mean, that's the Darius Smith out there. But no, jokes aside, he's playing well and deserves some credit for it. And then Patrick Queen, too. Him and Roquan, I think, might just be on the same strength and conditioning program because Patrick Queen also has beefed up and looks a lot bigger than he once did. And that play strength, being traded maybe for a little bit of speed, is just helping him function in every asset of being a linebacker. And I'm much, Queen's basically played about, 12 good games at this point now since Roquan arrived. And I don't think the Ravens should pay him necessarily, but I think he's shaping up to be an LB1 for somebody. And I would not have said that about him really going into last year or even early last year, but I think he's figured a lot of stuff out and is a much more complete player at this point. And it's a luxury that they have him right now. And then into the secondary, a lot of these guys have had to play. They've had injuries and stuff. Brandon Stevens is playing pretty well. He was always going to be kind of a draft and develop project type, but has been forced into action early because of all of the injuries they've had in Baltimore. And he's playing pretty solid right now as an outside corner. They're targeting him a ton, so you will see him get beat and give up some yardage as you would with any young corner, but he's held up very well on top of that. Relative to what you might expect. So he's going to get a +2. And then the tiny Ardarius Washington got a couple starts in the slot before getting hurt himself the first couple of weeks. So he held up pretty well there. And then Kyle Hamilton, we kind of joked about how he wasn't a safety last year. He was more of a slot corner. Well, this year he's playing safety and he's playing very well. Showing off some range, some good coverage abilities, making an impact, coming downfield, and they'll still use him in creative ways. They've been blitzing him and moving him around as that kind of defensive weapon, but with Marcus Williams out and no more Chuck Clark here, they've needed him to be a free safety a lot of the times, and he's held up just fine, if not very well, back there, as has Geno Stone. He's just such a classic Iowa D-back, right? Micah Hyde, Desmond King, just heady guy that played a ton of zone in college. Not the biggest, not the fastest, but he's showing off some range and instincts on the back end. He's been really physical and consistent coming downfield and tackling and supporting in run defense. He's doing his best Chuck Clark impression back there, if not actually playing better in coverage than Chuck Clark ever did. So both those safeties are holding up very well, and they've desperately needed that because of all the shakeup back there. And then we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, whose star of the month is going to be the star of their football team, TJ Watt. His pass rush efficiency this year is the best of his career right now. To put that in perspective, last year on 294 pass rush snaps, he had 31 pressures and 7 sacks. This year, on 110 less pass rush snaps through 5 games, he has 27 pressures, so just 4 less than he had last year, and a sack more. Not to mention he's dropping into coverage, continuing to show what he does there, being an impact in run defense, 2 forced fumbles, right back in the mix for Defensive Player of the Year. He is that dominant kind of takeover defensive player, and I've gone at it with Steelers fans about him not kind of coming into the year ranking up there with Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa, because his efficiency as a pass rusher hasn't been there with those guys. But now this year, it really is. He's on pace for one of those, 100 pressure, 20 plus sack seasons. I'm on board. He just needed to show this. So he's going to get some of that respect. And then let's talk about this offense if we have to. Kenny Pickett's just not playing well. I know Matt Canada is kind of the focal point of the blame here, and I agree. They just continue to be so stagnant and anemic in terms of creativity there. But, Kenny Pickett also not playing well. He's putting the ball in harm's way. It just feels like he's not trusting the offense when it is there, which, again, isn't all the time. But it's just, everything's compounding here. I don't think anyone's really going to disagree that Pickett hasn't been playing very well this year. And I definitely don't think people are going to disagree with Najee Harris. People have definitely been on the Najee hate train for a while now. He doesn't get great run blocking. He's not super athletic. That's not really his game. But at the same time, he's not making defenders miss. He has been an issue in terms of the receiving game, where traditionally that's been a nice fallback for him. Just doesn't look very good right now. He's going to come down to now George Pickens continues to impress. He's going to go up to catching everything. Now, it's funny, his contested catch percentage is actually kind of poor right now. I think that'll come back to earth, but he does have 2 just absurd catches, as we know him to have. But yeah, he's kind of been their offense right now, and he's going to keep climbing. On the other hand, Allen Robinson, I'm just done with him, man. I think he's done. Like, we might see an Allen Robinson midseason retirement at this point. He's averaging just 6.7 average depth of target right now. Like, he's not getting down the field, not being a separator. He's just not that dude anymore. And then Pat Freiermuth, this one's really frustrating because I don't think this one's necessarily on him, but at the same time, you're rated as one of the higher tight ends in the league, and through 4 games, you've got 8 receptions for 53 yards, just 6.5 yards per reception. Like, he's been a dump down option and nothing else right now. And, he's just not living up to his pedigree right now. And I hope they can get more creative and find him the football and we can bump him back up, because I know he's talented, but he's just not living up to it right now. I think it was time we lowered him. And then the center, Mason Cole, who was a nice kind of pleasant surprise last year, has been a disaster this year. He's been getting worked in pass protection, not getting a whole lot of push against the run. He's been kind of a journeyman that found a nice home here in Pittsburgh. It feels like he might be regressing back to his old self a little bit here. But then some other players on this defense, Keanu Benton, their 2nd-round pick, absolutely looks the part. He's been doing really well in both phases of the game, as a pass rusher, as a run defender. Was a very nice kind of complete package player coming out of Wisconsin, and he's living up to that. And then Alex Highsmith, that dude. We talked a lot about him in the Pittsburgh Steelers deep dive, being one of the more underrated players in the NFL. He gets that big payday, and he just continues to get better. And I don't know that he's necessarily done either. Like, there are no physical limitations on this guy. He's got get off, bend, power. He's got, different pass rush moves. He's a good run defender. He's a good coverage player. We think of him as a number 2 because he was a 3rd-round pick coming out of Charlotte, and he plays opposite of TJ Watt. But if he keeps playing like this, and if he keeps getting better, he very well might be a number 1 someday. So don't sleep on Alex Highsmith. He had that big strip sack fumble on Lamar to win the game against the Ravens. Everybody says TJ Watt's the guy that wins these games for the Steelers defense. Well, Alex Highsmith did his best TJ Watt impression the other day. And then into the secondary, Patrick Peterson's really struggling. We kind of knew this was likely, him going from such a zone-heavy defense in Minnesota at his age to back to more of that zone match, kind of man-heavy style of defense where he's got to, run with receivers a lot more. And it just has not worked out for him. They are picking on Pat Pete, and he does not look good. But I think we got to see more Joey Porter, man. He's looked really good in the 80 snaps that they've played him. I don't know why they're being so stubborn here. It's not like Patrick Peterson's playing very well. Levi Wallace continues to be very up and down. I don't get it. Put him out there. He's a damn good corner. Had that big interception against the Ravens to kind of get them back in the game in a big way. And then Chris Boswell, last member of the Killer Bee here, has been awesome this season. He's going to get a +3. And then we've got the Houston Texans. I mean, how can you go other than CJ Stroud for star of the month? Checking really every box. And I think we knew the processing, the accuracy when he's got a structure around him. We assumed he would be a pretty good player. That's why he got so many like Jared Goff and Dak Prescott comps. But where I want to give CJ Stroud credit here is I've really been impressed by his pocket presence. And I've made this point many times, but it really is the difference in what I saw from him at Ohio State and what we're seeing from him at Houston is when the pressure gets in, he's navigating it. He's stepping up. He's avoiding sacks and making good decisions. He's not bailing from clean pockets either, as much as I saw a lot of times at Ohio State. And it keeps coming back to that Georgia game where something just clicked. He goes through really 2 years at Ohio State where he didn't see a lick of pass rush. And it just, he kind of just had that clock in the back of his head, kind of playing the game on easy mode. But he did show in that Georgia game, once he had to stop playing quarterback on easy mode, that he can do some of that play extension stuff. So, it's just a fascinating experiment. I mean, really, it's just a unique case where it was a small sample size where he showed that trait, but in the NFL, it's been really good. So that's been a huge difference for CJ Stroud on top of everything else. So he's getting a +2 here, and I assume he's going to continue to climb here because the rest of this structure is actually really underrated right now. A lot of these guys are playing well, and they're only getting some of these offensive linemen back at this point. But before we talk about what's been good, Devin Singletary, not so much. This run game has been anemic for what it's worth. And Devin Singletary, we're just kind of waiting to see that juice that he had for Buffalo last year. I mean, he was really impressive last year. Go watch Devin Singletary's 2022 Buffalo Bills highlights. He had one of the best jump cuts in the league. He was explosive. I liked this signing, but he just hasn't been that guy. He's been a jag so far this year, just a guy. He's going to come down one. Granted, the run blocking hasn't been great in front of him here in Houston. It's been more the pass protection that's held up well. But let's talk about these receivers, both young players, Nico Collins and Tank Dell. They've been sensational. And guys, the Houston Texans are 7th in receiving grade this year. And these two guys right here are a huge part of that. I mean, Nico Collins is doing his, Mike Williams impression here. That was kind of the high-end comp on Nico Collins. And really, he looks the part there. He's getting open over the middle of the field. He's winning tough catches. He's showing stuff after the catch. This is a full-size X-wide receiver that has very quickly established an excellent chemistry with CJ Stroud. Their consistency on these in-breakers, these deep digs and benders off of play action, it's been like automatic where Stroud sees that part of the field so well. He's so accurate throwing with anticipation over the middle of the field, and Collins has no problem snapping off an in-breaking route and, handling contact after the catch over the middle. It's a really dangerous combination. And if you want to play single high structures against these guys, you've got to find a way to stop that combination because they've shown they'll just hit you time and time again there. And then Tank Dell, too, he's been so awesome, and he's a unique story, too. A 5'8", 164-pound wide receiver, but one of the best route-running prospects you'll ever see. I mean, he's been screaming open here, had that beautiful deep ball catch against the Jags where it was actually underthrown by CJ Stroud, and Dell had to work back into coverage and come down with a tough catch. Maybe the biggest thing with Tank Dell, though, other than just being involved and earning this team's trust to make him a focal point of the offense so early in his career. But the biggest thing for him is just the one drop, and that came in week 1. He had a brutal amount of drops at Houston. And it does seem he's hit the jugs machine and has cleaned some of that stuff up, at least, knock on wood so far. But that's huge for him. So these two guys are dynamic and different. Like you talk about a diversity of skill set. And, Robert Woods, John Mechie, they've been playing pretty well too. So they've actually got a handful of receivers here, which was not what we felt about this group coming in. We had a lot of questions about these receivers. They've really stepped up. I also do want to just talk about Dalton Schultz real quick. He actually really struggled in the first 3 weeks of the season. And if we did, studs and duds after week 3, he would have dropped. But the last 2 weeks, he's been really awesome. He's got that big go-ahead touchdown against the Falcons in week 5. He's got some really nice catches against Pittsburgh week 4. He's been much better lately. And then the offensive line as well. Some of these guys that you would expect to have really struggled when they announce all of these injuries and backups coming in. Some of these guys have actually stepped up really well. Kendrick Green, the acquisition from Pittsburgh, this just made sense, man. A guy that was drafted into a head-up inside zone power blocking scheme in a lot of ways in Pittsburgh. That was never Kendrick Green's game coming out of Illinois. He was one of these move centers. Think about like Drew Dahlman or Bradbury for the Vikings. That was Kendrick Green. And now he goes to a Shanahan-style wide zone blocking scheme. It's been a match made in heaven, and he's played really well. Did get injured, has missed some time, but I think he can be a starter for them. He's just been a good player. And then Jarrett Patterson, their 6th-round center. It's kind of funny. I had a similar grade on Jarrett Patterson as I did on Juice Scruggs. These guys were really tight for me in my rankings. They took Scruggs in the 2nd round and Patterson in the 6th. And they've probably gotten from Patterson what they expected to get from Juice Scruggs. he hasn't been perfect, but he's been just very average and not a problem for them as their center in this system. So they seem to have found something there. I mean, when in doubt, if you get to the 6th, 7th round and you've got room for an offensive lineman, just grab someone out of Notre Dame, because it feels like these guys always turn into at least like serviceable backups. And it seems that's at least what Jarrett Patterson is. But let's talk about this defense a little bit. You know, honestly, like pretty much everyone in the front 6 at least has played about as I expected. No one's really going up or down in that group, except for my dude, Blake Cashman. I tweeted about him. He is currently tied with Roquan Smith for the highest PFF grade for any linebacker that's played over 100 snaps this year. And I went back and looked just at my draft grades on him, because I frickin' loved Blake Cashman. I pounded the table more for him than arguably any prospect ever in the history of this channel. He ends up going in the 5th round. I had a 1st round grade on Blake Cashman ahead of Devin Bush and just behind Devin White. And what I didn't know about Blake Cashman is he has like a bunch of injury issues, and that's been his problem. That led to him getting cut by the Jets and then basically having to fight for this position here for the Texans. But I loved his tape, his speed to the ball, his awareness to break down the run, and his feel in coverage. He had a marvelous interception against Trevor Lawrence, where Lawrence thinks he can kind of sneak a slant behind him, and that Cashman wouldn't have the feel and change of direction ability to kind of work back with that slant developing behind him, and he picks him off. That's the type of athlete Blake Cashman is, and if he can stay healthy, I really think he can be a star linebacker in DeMeco Ryans' defense. I mean, he's got the coaching, obviously. I love his game. It really just comes down to health with him, but it's been really fun to see him playing at a high level for, really the first time in his career he's had consistency on a week-to-week basis here. But then into the secondary, I do want to mention Derek Stingley played pretty well in those first couple games. He's obviously rated quite highly as the number 3 overall pick, but struggled in his rookie season. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but it just sucks. Like, I thought he was playing quite well back there and was excited to see him keep going. I hope he can get back out there and build upon that, especially when Steven Nelson, the 30-year-old opposite of him, is having another career year, man. He's found such a good home here in Houston. He's just genuinely one of the more underrated players in the NFL. Very heady, quick, technically sound corner across the board. Deserves a little bit more love here for his really shutdown performance through the first 5 weeks of the season. And then Grayland Arnold, this random DB out of Baylor that I've never heard of, has been getting out there as kind of their hybrid dime back in a lot of ways, playing some slot, playing some safety, you name it. He's just been kind of sticky in coverage. He's been in a good position, and he's playing a role in this defense. It's the beauty of this series, is we get to highlight guys like that. But let's wrap it up with our final team here, the Tennessee Titans. Their star of the month is going to be the rookie running back Tyjae Spears. Been really fun to see him get involved in this offense as just kind of not even like the scat back to Derrick Henry, but just the guy that can kind of relieve Derrick Henry a little bit and provide a little bit of a different element to the offense. Just a very different player. But loved Tyjae Spears. Thought he should have gone a lot higher than he did in the draft, but there were some injury questions there. But right now he's healthy and looks explosive. My pro comp for him was Aaron Jones, and he kind of looks like Aaron Jones inside this offense, man. He's making guys miss. He's had explosive plays. He's been an impact in the receiving game. He's just a good player. And I think the more that they use him, the more his rating is just going to go up. And then beyond that, it's just been a very up and down season for the Titans. They've been kind of a week-to-week football team right now, especially on offense. I do think a lot of pieces for the Titans are playing up to expectations. So we're not going to see a ton of changes here, but it's not that there's no changes. At tight end, there's been some shakeup. Josh Wiley, the 5th round pick out of Cincinnati, the 6'7" dude. He's gotten into the lineup. He's gotten a couple targets, made some nice catches these last couple weeks. So we'll see if he sees an uptick in his looks, especially as Chig Okonkwo has struggled to be a part of this offense here with Tim Kelly. He has had a couple drops, and just not being an impact in the receiving game seems to be cooling off a little bit from that hot finish to last season. I still like Chig, but had to come down and pump the brakes on his hype just a little bit here. And then on the offensive line, Andre Dillard at left tackle, I will say if we did this after week 3, he would have gone down 2, maybe 3. Really struggled in some of those early matchups, especially against Myles Garrett. One of the worst tackle performances you'll see on the year, and you obviously don't want to see that. But I will say the last couple of weeks, he's settled in and been much better, and hopefully he can kind of build upon that and keep things going. But he does need to come down for how he looked to start the year. And then right tackle, Chris Hubbard has stepped in and just been a rock for them. He has had some losses for sure. He's not the most incredible run blocker or anything. But I think he's stable, and I'm really encouraged by this team keeping him in there week 5. You have Nicolas Petit-Frere comes off the suspension. I thought they were overly stubborn with Petit-Frere, trotting him out at right tackle. He was really bad last year, and I would not shake this up right now. I think Chris Hubbard is a much better option at right tackle. And then the Daniel Brunskill fit has been really good here too. He continues to just kind of work through some of his inconsistencies that he had in San Francisco. That's kind of why they let him go. But, he's started so many games at this point. He's approaching 4,000 career snaps at this point in the NFL. And yeah, I mean, he's played in Tennessee's not full wide zone nowadays, but they still run a ton of wide zone. That's what he did in San Francisco. 30 years old. He's just a solid player, nothing special. But he's been a nice signing for them for sure. And then on the defense, some guys rising, some guys falling. Harold Landry coming off that big injury last year. I think probably just not 100%, but has been incredibly inefficient in his pass rushing. Just 5 pressures on 123 pass rush snaps, just the 1 sack. Hasn't been very good against the run either. I like Harold Landry. I hope he can kind of get some of that juice back and start getting after the quarterback, and he can get kind of the benefit of the doubt to get these grade points back, if you will, rather quickly. But right now, he is just not living up to his old self right now. And then the linebacker, Jack Gibbons. It's a good week for Minnesota linebackers playing in the AFC South. Gibbons has beat out Monty Rice as this team's number 2 linebacker, and his size and run defense impact is definitely a presence for the Titans. And it's kind of a nice, I mean, I guess they've had Zach Cunningham, and that's kind of what Jack Gibbons is doing for them. But Azeez Al-Shaair is traditionally undersized. Monty Rice is undersized. I think they like to have a little bit more of that thunder and lightning combo there with these linebackers, and Gibbons has been the thunder. He's been a pretty good starter for them this year. Undrafted free agent out of Minnesota, I think in 2021, maybe even last year. But then their other linebacker, Azeez Al-Shaair, the signing out of San Francisco, who was San Fran's kind of LB3, getting that opportunity to be a starter here in Tennessee, definitely looks the part. He's been kind of flying around the field, making plays. Hasn't been perfect, but definitely getting those reps as a starter, seeing that he can still contribute, getting full-time snaps is good to see. And then into the secondary, Christian Fulton is going to go down 1. He has been getting peppered with targets, giving up a ton of yards. He's kind of been the guy you can point your finger at when they give up completions and have bad days through the air. He just has not had a good year. Fortunately, though, Sean Murphy-Bunting, one of my favorite signings from the offseason, has played really well for Tennessee. Such a great scheme fit. It's similar to what he did in Tampa Bay, where he can, play sticky man coverage. He is heady in zone with some of these pattern matching things that they like to do. But yeah, he's just a good player on a good defense, having a good year. Signed that kind of prove-it contract, and I will not be surprised to see Sean Murphy-Bunting, as I said, when they signed him and in the Titans deep dive, I thought he was going to play well and earn like a, kind of 3-year, $45 million contract, something like that. I think he's playing up to that right now. And that is going to do it. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening, for watching. I hope you guys have been enjoying. So now we're going to be going every 2 weeks with Studs and Duds. So 2 Saturdays from now, we'll have the NFC. And then 4 Saturdays from now, we'll have the AFC. 6 Saturdays from now, we'll have the NFC again, so on and so forth. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out. Let me know in the comments down below if you think I missed anybody. But other than that, we'll see you guys later. Peace out.